Well, to talk about the options in Athens, I'm joined by George Magnus, Senior Economic Advisor at UBS Investment Bank. Thank you so much for coming in.
Morning.
George, actually in the last couple of days, so we've had the secret meeting, and if you speak to economists and analysts, say, well, they can't even keep the secret meeting secret, so how can they deal with the crisis as a whole? And others saying, well, actually, at least we know that now there is even a stronger political will than there was just 2 weeks ago. It's a very critical moment, isn't it?
It's a pretty sensitive moment, actually, and I think it's only to be expected that there's a sort of a complete denial on the idea that restructuring or rescheduling of debt is on the agenda, notwithstanding the comments of individual politicians. But I'd be shocked if it wasn't really happening. It would certainly be very irresponsible not to basically have a plan to basically recognise the problem of insolvency and what happens if the reform process in Greece really gets stuck.
Now, we've had some breaking news comments from Mr. Binismagi in the last couple of minutes, so I just wanted to bring you some more, because he says that Greece has wasted its time pondering a restructuring, and he says that a Greek disaster would have a contagion effect and, of course, the whole of the Eurozone. Do you believe now that actually restructuring is the only way, and how soon can it arrive?
Oh, I think the sooner it happens, the better. In fact, the longer it's delayed and the longer that European leaders kind of try to turn their eyes to it and say, well, you know, perhaps it doesn't have to happen, does it? I think actually that's quite damaging. So I mean, I understand, of course, that it's very important, you know, in a way for the leaders to say that this is something that we know we don't have to do this, and there are other ways of doing it, and we want to, you know, we're trying to get the Greeks to accelerate the reform program and privatization proceeds and so on. But actually, these are all technicalities, really.
But what happens when you restructure? It's going to hit the German banks, it's going to hit the French banks, it's going to hit the whole of the Eurozone.
Yeah, well, there's no such thing as a painless restructuring, no question about it. And not recognizing that, obviously, is a problem, because the longer you leave it, the bigger the pain and the bigger the haircut becomes. So actually a preemptive kind of move to really basically restructure, I mean, they've already elongated Greece's maturities once on the 80 billion section tranche of the official loan. I mean, I'm pretty convinced that's going to happen again, along with a further reduction in Greece's interest payments. I mean, that will make some contribution towards viability, but in the end, of course, what Greece also needs is economic growth and a commitment on the structural reform side.
But if it does restructure, is it going to be the end of the European project as we know it? Or will it at least be such a huge seismic shock that it will at least replicate what we saw with Lehman Brothers?
It's certainly going to be a shock. I mean, not as shocking now, because obviously we're getting used to the idea, and we're getting used to the idea that Greece is probably going to do this in the end. But I think that I don't think it means the end of the Eurozone at all. It could mean the end of the Eurozone, or the end of Greece's participation in the Eurozone, if you know, European leaders continue to kind of play not dumb, but actually pretend that it's not
okay.
realistic. Exactly. And if you try to just basically kick the can down the road again and again and again and again, eventually, of course, the Greeks are going to get really fed up. And
so you think that would also push them to try and think of alternatives to the euro?
It could be, because politically, if the whole of the adjustment of Greece's problem rests with the Greek people, and you have years of unrelenting restraint and austerity, I mean, politically, that's very, very dangerous. And I think that, you know, almost certainly at some point in the next 2 or 3 years, 4 years, you know, political parties in Greece and citizens will almost certainly rise up against that kind of pressure.
What do you make of the current downgrades, or at least the threats of current downgrades from credit agencies? Is it again mistimed, or are they behind the curve?
Well, you know, I always have kind of reservations about what value you know, we get out of the information content of these reports. But you know, it is important, I suppose, in the sense that excuse me, it's important from a market point of view, because of I mean, already Greece has obviously downgraded so far that actually very few people voluntarily hold Greek debt anyway. But the problem, I think, is that, you know, the greater or the more intense this cycle gets, of course, the bigger the contagion effect can be on, I mean, irrationally perhaps, but the bigger the contagion effect can be on other peripherals and then on other sovereigns.
Spain?
So including Spain. So I think that the issue is it is incumbent on Europe to basically draw a line somewhere and say enough is enough. We've got to basically deal with this in a traditional debt restructuring manner.
George, thank you so much. George Magnus there.